Hello, this is Lisa Hanson, and this video is to complete the free application for federal student aid for the 23-24 school year. When completing the FAFSA for 23-24, you'll use income from 2021. If you're doing the FAFSA application, the income will come off the 21 tax return, or any questions that are asking for annual amounts of untaxed income, you would calculate the annual amount for 2021. When you start the FAFSA application, the first year that you do it, you'll need to create an FSA ID. Both the student and at least one parent will need an FSA ID. Now, the FSA ID is tied to an email account and phone number, and they'll ask you to verify those email accounts and phone number as you're completing the process. And for security purposes, the Department of Education is also using two-factor authentication. So you'll be asked to use that to log in when you're completing the application or any federal student aid transactions. Also, you need to know that both the parent and student need to supply a unique email address. Remember, this is used for signing purposes, and since you need to sign separately for your data, that email address has to be unique for each of you. When you're doing the FSA ID, we highly encourage you to write down the information that was used. Parents and students, you'll be using this FSID for multiple years each time you apply for financial aid. Students can use it after they're done to review student loan information or make payments. And parents, if you have other kids coming down the way, again, that FSAID is used for multiple years and for multiple students in the case of parents. So do write down the email address that you use to sign up, your username, and then there'll be challenge questions that you provide to enable you to reset or go back into your FSAID. I would write down the answers to the challenge questions as well and keep that for annual reference. Oftentimes, I recommend you keep it with your tax information. Once the FSAID is created, you'll need to go back to the FAFSA application and you'll log in, or the student typically will log in with the FSAID. The information that was supplied for the FSAID includes contact information, and so that's actually copied onto the application, which makes it a little bit easier. And then you're going to start going through all the questions. And if you have any questions or need more information, I would point your attention to the little circle with the question mark to the right of each of the data elements that you fill in. That will provide additional details if you click on that question mark. And so if you need more information or you're not sure exactly what they're asking, click on that question mark and you'll have additional information. So I like to start out talking about student demographic information, and this seems a little bit silly, but it's very important. So when it comes to the name and social security number and date of birth, the information needs to match what's on file with the Social Security Administration. Sometimes we'll have students that would prefer to use a nickname or their preferred name, but this would be a place where that legal name that's on file with Social Security needs to match. So make sure that you provide that. When you provide the student demographics, the email address, of course, is part of that, and the Department of Education will communicate with your student through their email. Now, rest assured, they're never going to provide any confidential information by email. They'll provide a link to have the student go back out and look at the FAFSA application. But the important thing is you're not watching the mail, because you're not going to have information coming through the mail for your application material. We then ask for the student's marital status. And most of the questions are as of the day you're completing the FAFSA. Marital status will be one of those. And so you'll report that information. We also ask for citizenship information. And so to qualify for Title IV or federal financial aid, the student has to be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, and there'll be additional information if you qualify under that eligible non-citizen category. We then ask for the student's high school completion status. And this is one you're going to want to read very carefully, because the question says, as of the time you start your college classes. So, you can start your FAFSA application in October, but some students won't actually graduate into high school until May. But as long as then you're going to start your college courses after that, then you would be able to answer the question that I will have completed my high school status, because it's as of the time you start your college classes. We then ask for name and location of high school, and there'll be drop-down boxes where you can provide the city and state, and then choose your high school. If not, you can actually data enter that information. When it comes to colleges in the FAFSA, students can list up to 10 colleges to receive their FAFSA information. And as you select those colleges, then you'll be asked to enter housing plans for each of those. So you'll tell us whether you plan to live on campus, off campus, with parent for each of the colleges that you select. And if you have more than 10, you can actually go back in and make corrections after you do your original application to add additional schools onto the FAFSA. When doing the FAFSA, then we need to determine whether or not parent information will be collected. And so the dependency questions I have provided here on the screen. If you answer no to all of these questions, you're considered dependent and would be supplying then parent information in addition to student income and assets. If you answer yes to any of these questions, you're considered independent and parent information would not be collected. So the details are here, but the easy way to say is, are you 24 years of age, an orphan or ward of the court, a veteran of the armed services? Is the student married, or will the student be working on a master's or doctorate program in 23-24? Or is the student on active duty or a veteran of the armed forces? Or do you have legal dependents who receive more than half of their financial support from the student between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2024? If you answer yes to any of those, you're considered independent. We have a few additional questions. It says, is the student a ward of the court? An emancipated minor, and that's where you've actually gone through the court system and you'll have legal documents that show that you are an emancipated minor. The college will typically ask for a copy of that. Or if the student was in legal guardianship, or homeless. And homeless has some very specific criteria, so be sure and read those very carefully to see if you meet the criteria for homeless. Once you have made the determination that parent income is going to be reported, then we need to know what parent information to include. And so if the student's biological parents are married or if they are living together, then you report income for both parents. And in some cases, you're going to need to take those two tax returns and add those together. Sometimes we'll have married filing separately on the parent section. If the student's biological parents are divorced or separated, then you report the income of the biological parent that the student lived with the most during the preceding 12 months. And if we have a circumstance where the student goes back and forth equally between parents' homes, then the parent who provided greater than 50% of the student's support would be the parent to complete the FAFSA application. And then the next thing you need to know is if the biological parent has remarried, we'll also include the joint income for the biological parent and the step parent that's in that household. And I put some yellow on the different slides where things will change. We do have some changes planned for 24-25, and this will be one of those areas that changes. And so in 24-25, it will be the parent who has provided the greater amount of support that will be the parent to complete the FAFSA application. So we will see some changes there, and I just wanted to highlight those since we know that's coming down the pike. So when it comes then to the parent section, we need some parent demographic information. And again, that Social Security number, name, and date of birth, and that it will also be matched with the Social Security Administration. So sometimes we'll have parents that's name has changed as a result of a divorce and or marriage. And this would be a case where it'd be helpful to have that information updated with Social Security prior to doing that FAFSA application. We then ask, has the parent lived in their state of legal residence for at least 5 years? This is important for our Illinois MAP grant, so be sure and answer that question if you meet the 5-year limit. If you don't meet the 5-year limit, then the question goes on to say, give us the month and the year that you became a resident of your state of legal residence. We then ask for household size, and this one, it's broken into several different questions, but read those definitions very carefully. And because we want to know how many people the income that is being used is, how many people are being supported by the income that is reported on the application. So read that very carefully to determine your household size. And then we want to know how many will be in college at least half time. Now, we do not include parents in the number in college. If we do have parents who are pursuing college for greater than half time, that would be a time to report that to the college or university, and they may be able to take that into account for you and possibly get the student some additional financial assistance. This also will change for 24-25, and so we'll no longer be including multiple people in college, which qualifies a student for additional financial aid. So we'll see some changes there for 24-25. When it comes time to fill out the income questions, you have an opportunity to use what they call IRS data retrieval. So the Department of Education has worked in conjunction with the IRS, and you have an opportunity as part of the application process to say, I would like you to go get my income information from the IRS data system. And we highly recommend this. It's very helpful because, number one, we know the information is accurate. It does speed up processing, particularly on the financial aid office side. 1/3 of all applications are selected for a process called verification. And in that case, we need to actually see the tax return information and make sure that it was put onto the FAFSA correctly. But any family who chooses IRS data retrieval and can use that to do the information, we know that information is accurate. And so it essentially eliminates that step of verification, and that one can take several weeks to finish. So I highly recommend the IRS data retrieval if you're eligible to do so. If you've had a change in marital status since you filed your tax returns, that may make it so that you're not eligible to use the IRS data retrieval. If you choose to use IRS data retrieval, you give permission to go get the information from the IRS. And then when that information comes back, it's actually masked. So you don't actually get to see the data. But once again, we know that information is accurate, and it does make processing very smooth. And so I would highly recommend that you do that. Here's a list of some of the items that come over. It's actually, there's probably about 4 or 5 more that also get transferred through that IRS data retrieval tool. But if you choose not to use it, then you're going to need to actually data enter each of these items. And when you do the data entry, it will say, go to your tax return and look at schedules, what such and such and line whatever. And it will tell you then which items or where to copy that or where to find that information on the tax return. So I highly recommend that IRS data retrieval if you qualify. If you don't do the data retrieval, you're going to enter like the adjusted gross income and taxes paid. Use those specific line items. And here's kind of an example that will show you to use 1040 line 1 and plus schedule 1's line 3 through 6, yada, yada. So just read all those instructions. One of the other things that we'll ask is, even whether you do data retrieval or not, it asks for income earned from work by the parents. And so it says parent 1 wages and then parent 2 wages. And oftentimes people leave this blank because the wages are usually included as part of your adjusted gross income. But it's not in your best interest to leave that blank. When we ask for the income earned from work here, and again, it is income that you earned, so it wouldn't include like if you were qualified to get retirement benefits here. So the income earned from work is actually used to make an allowance for the FICA taxes that you pay. And if I have either a single working household or both parents work outside the home to make the income, they know that there are costs associated with making that income, whether it be for clothing and lunches and gas, etc. And so they make an allowance for you because that income is coming because you had to actually go out and earn that money. They make an allowance, and it will actually allow the student to qualify for additional financial aid. So be sure and split that out, and that would come from your W-2 form. So read through those. One other thing I would just point out is that pensions are not going to be reported in the asset section. So for those of you who are involved in a pension program and you've been putting aside money for years, the money that you've accumulated in your retirement benefits is not reported as an asset. But you will see that the year you put money into your pension, it is included on the income side of the application. And so take a look at that. That will come off of your W-2 form, and you'll want to include those pensions there. Then we ask on the application, did the parents file a Schedule 1? This will also be asked of the student later. But you'll note on here, there are some reasons that say if you only filed a Schedule 1 because of, and then there's a list of items. And please be sure and read that, because if you qualify under one of those exemptions, then you don't actually have to say yes to this. You can say no, and that actually qualifies the student for additional financial aid. So I would encourage you to read that part carefully. And the other thing is, if you have to fill out the application manually, you're not using data retrieval, there's a question that says, ask for your federal income taxes paid. And federal income taxes paid needs to come off of the tax return. Often what I find is that families will take and calculate what they paid that shows on their W-2 form. But remember, when you file taxes, you're actually calculating your federal tax liability. And you either get a refund of part of the money you paid, or you pay additional taxes. And so it's important that that come off of the tax return and not what was withheld in the W-2 form, because that would not be the final number. Once you get through that, there'll be a list of untaxed income items, and there's 10 or 15 items that have to be reported under untaxed income information. When you do untaxed income, it will be things like child support, unemployment benefits, etc. And so when you do that, take a look, because the untaxed income needs to be for the calendar year. So don't report a monthly amount here. Make sure that you calculate it for calendar year 2021, and then report that calendar year amount. Next, we go to the asset section. And when you do assets, a couple things to note: we don't ever report your home value. We don't report the value of your cars, etc. And so when it comes to assets, the first thing we want to know is, what is the value of your cash, checking, and savings accounts? Now, again, this is as of the day that you're completing your FAFSA. So I always say pay your bills first. And then the next thing we want to know is, what is the net worth of investments? And again, this is a great place to go use that question mark to the side there, because it will give you the list of what is included under investments and what items are excluded under the investment sections. And investments are going to include things such as stocks, bonds, money market funds, etc. So take a look at those and then report those investments. And then the next we have net worth of business and or investment farm. Now, again, there's some very specific criteria here. So we only have to report business assets if you have more than 100 employees for your small business or for your business. And then when it comes to farm, we don't report the value of a family farm, but we do include the value for an investment farm. And so a family farm is a farm where you actually take care of the animals, you plant the crops, you complete the harvest. Usually you will file a Schedule F as part of your tax return. The opposite of that, and what we will include for asset portions, is an investment farm. And so an investment farm, the easiest way to explain that is, you've inherited land, sometimes it's even in another state. Maybe it's with your siblings. And so you don't actually take care of the operation, somebody else is taking care of that. And you typically get a check for your portion of the proceeds each year. In that case, you would report your portion of any assets. And so if that's split between multiple family members, determine what part belongs to you. And it's always net assets. So if there's any debt against it, you would subtract the debt against that asset before you would come up with the actual value then that you would have to report. Once we get through the income and assets for parents, then we're going to repeat those very same questions for the student. So we're not going to go through it again. Just know that we're going to go through those very same questions, same instructions that would be for the student section. And so once you do that, then we'll proceed with the application. So once you've finished entering both student and parent data, you'll have an opportunity to review the FAFSA. And so this is a good time to just take a look and make sure that everything appears correct to you. Remember, we don't report cents on the FAFSA application. There was actually a cents box next to each of those items that you filled out. And so make sure that you didn't report cents, because if so, you just over-reported your income. After you've checked everything, then there'll be a box at the bottom that says that you agree to the terms, which is essentially that you provided true and correct information. And then the student will click sign and submit their FAFSA form. And because they started with their FSA ID, they don't have to put it in again. Once the student has signed, then the parent needs to provide their signature on the FAFSA application. So in this case, you could have put the parent with the FSA ID in either parent 1 or parent 2 slot of the FAFSA. So you're going to need to go back to look to see which parent is signing the FAFSA and know whether you put them in parent 1 or parent 2. And then choose that parent to sign the application. That parent will also agree to the terms that they provided true and correct information. And then in this case, you'll enter the parent's FSA ID and the password associated with that FSA ID. And then parent will hit sign the FAFSA form, so they have completed their signature. Once we have both the student and parent signatures, then the next step is to submit the FAFSA application. So just by signing it doesn't actually get it processed. You actually have to click submit my FAFSA now. And when you do that, it will come up with a confirmation page, and that will indicate that you were successful in completing the FAFSA and submitting it. I would recommend that you print that confirmation page, and that way you have information, and there's a couple numbers on there that we can help if needed to get your application information. So if you have access to it, I would print that confirmation page. And then there's some good information about the colleges that you've selected that you may want to look over. After you submit the FAFSA application, now it's time to start watching for email confirmation. So the student will get an email confirmation their FAFSA has been processed, and the parent, if email address, will also get a confirmation that the FAFSA application has been processed. At that point, the student should review the FAFSA application. And at this point, then you're going to start getting communications from the colleges that you've selected to receive your information. So make sure that you're reading those. Sometimes we may ask you to submit additional forms or documents to complete your processing. If once you're awarded financial aid, the student may be required to go out and to accept their financial aid awards. And then if the student wishes to take out a student loan, there are some additional steps to complete a master promissory note and an entrance counseling so that the student understands the provisions of the loan. Some families will be asked to submit a verification worksheet, and that will then help us complete the application and get the student awarded financial aid. So start watching your email, and that will get you through the process, but the hard part at this point is done. I mentioned along the way, but let me just kind of clarify then. We do have some expected changes on the FAFSA starting with 24-25. There will be a change to the actual formula used to calculate student aid. So if you didn't qualify in 23-24, highly recommend that you apply again for 24-25. The overall expectation is that more students will qualify in 24-25 based on these changes in the formula. A couple things that will impact you and make you less eligible is that they're no longer going to count the number of students that are in college at more than half time. If that's a case where you have multiples in college, you may want to reach out to the schools and see if there's anything that can be done. And then they will start including business assets and farm assets for everyone in 24-25. So that will be a change that will impact us, particularly those of us in the rural areas that have farms. One of the nice things that will happen in 24-25 is that the formula will be called the Student Aid Index, used to calculate the financial aid eligibility for Pell Grant, and it will strictly go off of family size and income as compared to the federal poverty rate. And so for years, families have said, will I be Pell eligible? Is there a chart? Well, there will be starting with 24-25. Now, even if you didn't fall into that chart, I would still recommend that you file the FAFSA. It will be used to calculate state financial aid, institutional financial aid, and eligibility for student loans. So you're still going to want to file that FAFSA application, even if you didn't fall into the chart to be Pell eligible. If you have questions, I would encourage you to contact Sandburg's Financial Aid Office. We are the local community college, and we will help any student going to any college or university to complete the FAFSA application. And so I've provided our phone number here. There's an email address if you prefer to communicate with us through email. And we do offer either in-person or Zoom appointments for anyone, again, to complete that FAFSA application. And so here is a link to our site where you can actually sign up for a Zoom appointment. Otherwise, you can come out during our office hours. We have computers right outside the financial aid office, and we will sit down and help you do the FAFSA one-on-one. In addition to this video, we do have some other videos that you may like to review. We try to keep them fairly short. So we have what happens after the FAFSA to understand how we award financial aid. Then there's a video on need analysis and awarding aid that will talk you through how that process works. What does college cost? We'll help you compare college cost and understand what you may have to pay versus the different colleges that are out there. And then for students from our local area, Galesburg, in the Galesburg school systems, or over in Monmouth-Roseville, United High School, we have a promise program. And to understand that promise program, there's a applying for promise video. So I hope you found this helpful. If you have questions, by all means, reach out to our office, and glad that you could join us. Thanks.